In this demo, we're going to be showing Service Discovery integration with Brocade vADC. To do that, we're going to be using StackStorm, Services Director, and also Virtual Traffic Manager. But let me take you through the components we're using before we get into the demo. So inside StackStorm, I have a number of packs. I have one for communicating with Consul, which is the service discovery platform we're going to be demoing today. We have vADC, which is a pack to talk to Brocade Services Director and also the vTM. And we have this ST2 bridge, which is a number of components to bridge service discovery like Consul with vADC. So as I said, we also have a service director. This one is currently has no vTM instances deployed because I haven't started any up yet, but this is going to do our licensing for the vTMs. So they're the two components I have running at the moment. Mostly everything else we're going to do is going to be deployed inside Docker. So first of all, we need to start up Consul. And we should have two Consul servers running. If we come back over here, I should be able to connect to them on their IP address, which should be that. Okay, so two new Consul services, two new Consul nodes, sorry. The service that it knows about is Consul because they're brand new. These are the two nodes, nothing in the key value store. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is start up with Traffic Manager. I'm going to do that just using this alias here. vTM open takes me to the Traffic Manager, and then we can log in. Okay, so it's just been deployed. Doesn't have a license at the moment, so I'm just going to tell it to run in developer mode for now. And that's it. There are four components. So we have the Services Director to do the licensing of vTM. We have StackStorm to manage the integration between vTM and Consul. We have Consul itself, and we have the vTM. Okay, so next thing we want to do then is to license our Traffic Manager. It's running in developer mode. We want to add an instance into Service Director so that it can be licensed and given some bandwidth. There are a number of ways we could do that. We could do that through the UI by executing an action in here, BSD license vTM. We could perform the same action by SSHing onto StackStorm and using xt2 run to execute do the same action. So vADC BSD license vTM like that, or we could use ChatOps, but in this instance I'm just going to do it through the UI. So feature pack is fine, vTM, I'll call it vTM 001, bandwidth, I don't know, 178 meg, address is 172.17.04, password is this, go. So what StackStorm's doing is it's communicating with the REST API of the Services Director using the vADC pack, and it's telling it to license our Traffic Manager for 178 megabits. And if we come over here now, we should see that, there you go, it's got a universal license and it's limited to 178 megabits. Excellent. So now we've got our Service Director has licensed our vTM. Now we want to do some actual configuration. So inside StackStorm we have our ST2 bridge. Sorry, I'm looking at the rules. We've got ST2 bridge, and in here we've got three actions we can run, three rules. We've got an autoscaler rule, which we'll look at first, and that does autoscaling of nodes within a pool. That's already been configured on vTM. And we've got ChatOps, which just sends messages to our ChatOps whenever things change. And we've got an orchestrator rule, which we'll come back to later. So the autoscaler basically just configures a pool. So it's like doing autoscaling on vTM, but instead of vTM managing the autoscaling, StackStorm is going to take nodes that it discovers from Consul and push them into vTM that way. So what we're going to do first is obviously deploy a service onto vTM. I'm actually going to use Slack and use ChatOps to deploy this. So let's deploy our service. So vTM deploy service name, we call it demo web. Is it deploy? Yep, on vTM 001 with, I'll just give it one node as a placeholder because this deploy service needs that. 172.17.0.4.100 for the traffic manager, and the vTM is called that. This is going to create a virtual server, a traffic IP, and a pool on our vTM. Okay, so chain complete. Come over here, we can say we've got a demo web server, we've got a demo web pool, and we've also got a demo web traffic IP on 172.17.0.100. And we can actually go there if you want to. And there you go, an Apache web page, nice. So that's a service setup, but we don't want the pools to be configured manually via StackStorm or anything else. We want Consul to manage that. So what we want to do now is actually deploy a new service in Consul. To do that, we're going to use Docker again. So as you may remember, we've got a vTM, we've got 2 Consul nodes. Next thing we want to do is actually deploy some nodes. Now I'm going to use demo web. Actually, I'm missing a step. st2 rule list, st2 sensor list. So what we need to do is we need to enable one of our st2 bridge rules and also our st2 bridge sensor. So first of all, let's enable the ChatOps and the autoscaler. ChatOps, enable autoscaler, and for them to do anything we also need to enable our sensor, which is our Consul bridge sensor. So now StackStorm is monitoring Consul. Now it's monitoring Consul, we can deploy a new demo web service. You see straight away I've got a message into ChatOps saying it's a create action because it's detected a new service called demo web with a node of 172.17.0.5. If we go back to our vTM configuration now and refresh this page, it's now talking to that, which is using this Docker instance. So that's one node being deployed. Obviously, if we were to scale up and down this service and deploy more nodes, they register themselves with Consul. StackStorm picks up the registration. It should send us an event in here. There you go. So it's found 3 nodes this time, and the pool should be updated accordingly. And we can see that all happening in our history. So Consul autoscaler, find active vTM, update the pool. And that's all the autoscaler does basically. So if I shut down those nodes, if I were to shut them all down, actually we'll leave one running. If I shut down those 2, you will see so this one, I think it's that one, but anyway, I think it's run, so we're back to one node. So that is Consul. Consul obviously has nodes registered with it and services registered, and as the nodes in the services appear and disappear, the pool gets updated accordingly on the traffic manager. So far so good. So that was autoscaling. The the ability to manage nodes in a pool based on nodes in a service in Consul. So the StackStorm just creates a pool with the same name as a service in Consul with the same nodes it finds in Consul. But what if you want StackStorm and Consul to be able to manage a full end-to-end vTM configuration and apply additional properties through Consul itself? Well, that is what the orchestrator rule does. So let's have a look at that next. So if we look at the rule list, you can see up until now we've been using the autoscaler and the chat ops rule. They're both enabled. What we're going to do now is disable the autoscaling rule and enable the orchestrator rule. So that's enabled, but it needs a little bit more configuration. So if we look at our configuration for the bridge, you can see it's got this key value path which is set to production LB, and that is where it will look to find load balancer related configuration. So let's go back to Consul. You can see the services we've been running with so far. We're going to create a new service in a second, but before we do, we need to give the orchestrator some additional configuration. So we create a production LB folder, and this is where StackStorm will look. So it will expect to find a folder named after the service. So we're going to create a service called foobar and create a folder for that. Within here we need a cluster key, and this needs to tell it configuration about the cluster. So we could provide a list of VTMs, and if we did this, then Consul would StackStorm would find one of these VTMs that is active and use it to push the configuration to. Alternatively, you can give it the cluster ID as registered in the services director. So we're going to do that. So our cluster ID is this, and we're going to put that in there. So it will also want to find a folder called config, and it needs at least a traffic IP configuration. So let's just set that up quickly. So we're going to properties, basic IP addresses. So these are the IP addresses in the VIP, so 172.7.101 and 172.170.102. And it also needs a machine, and these are the traffic managers that are going to be able to host that group. I've obviously only got one running at the moment, so we'll just put that one in there. Oops. Okay, so create that, and that's all you need. So you need a folder named after the service, you need a cluster key to tell vTM which cluster to configure, service director which cluster to configure, and you need a config key with a tip that describes what the VIP should look like. So as long as it's got those few things, it will be able to configure a service on our traffic manager. So all that remains for us to do is to create the service. To do that, so we've been creating ones with demo web as the name. Now we're going to create one called foobar. So we should get a foobar service in here. When we next poll it, you see we have a create event, and on our traffic manager we have a foobar service. And the config summary shows it's created a traffic IP, it's created a virtual server, a traffic IP group, and a pool. Unlike with standard auto scaling, as we create nodes in that service, they appear in here. They get picked up by StackStorm, and that generates the configuration. So find active vTM, process ADC configs, and pool. So you see on this run, all we did was update the pool, whereas on the first run, we created the pool, we created a VIP, and we created a virtual server. If we refresh this, we've now got 2 nodes in our foo bar service. So I said you could create additional configuration. So all we've done really is told it what VIPs to use, but we can give it additional things as well. We can give it additional vServer configuration and pool configuration too. And just to verify that it did create 2 VIPs, you can see 101 and 102 both in there. Okay, so let's say we want to enable something like, I don't know, content caching. You can see in here it's disabled by default. Enabled no, cache time 600. They're the defaults. If we want to override that, it's quite simple. We can just create a vServer key, and in here we do properties web cache enabled true, and let's set the max time to an hour. Create that key. Now what the orchestrator does, it doesn't only look for nodes being deployed, it looks for configuration changes as well. So although we haven't deployed a node, because we've changed the configuration, the sensor's detected that and it's run through a redeploy of the service. So if we refresh this now, it says yes, 3600. And if we look in the history, you can see that Consul went through and reconfigured the service for us. So there you go. A service deployed completely from Consul. Question is, I guess, the only question that remains is what happens if all the nodes disappear. Well, if all the nodes disappear, then so does the service. And the service isn't in Consul. It's also not in vTM. Thank you for watching.